Good afternoon. This is Claudia Filos with the Center for Hellenic Studies. I'm here today, this afternoon, to have a video dialogue with artist Glynnis Fawkes and two very wonderful members of our Hour 25 and Heroes X community, Janet Oselak and Sarah Scott. Thanks so much for being here, everybody.
Thanks.
So, Glynnis, I'd love to just share some information about you and your work with our viewers. So you're an artist and cartoonist. You're also an archaeological illustrator, and you teach a course on comics at the University of Vermont. You've drawn comics for Gregory Nash's translations of the Homeric hymns to Aphrodite, Demeter, and Dionysus. You have received a Fulbright Fellowship, and that has resulted in the publication of 2 books, one of paintings, another of cartoons, both about archaeology, and your work can be found at glynnisfawkes.com. So at this time, I'd like to open up to Janet. I know Janet has some questions for you, Glynnis.
Hi, Glynnis. Thanks for visiting us again. My question is going to be about cartoons. As a medium, how did you decide on cartoons?
That's a very good question. Thanks, Janet. Well, actually, I've always drawn cartoons, and I think that I've always been influenced by other cartoonists, especially cartoons from the New Yorker that I was reading as I grew up. I think the words and pictures together can create something that neither can on their own. And also, I think I've always loved ancient art, I mean, especially Egyptian art and Greek vase painting from when I was really young. And I think those, to me, are very similar to how comics work for us now. I mean, especially the vase painting where the characters are named. They don't have word balloons like we're used to, but especially if ancient viewers would know the story and they'd see how the characters are placed together to tell a story. And to me, that always seemed so appealing. And so I have my background is in painting and drawing, but I somehow was never satisfied. Well, yes, I am, but I always wanted. While I was doing paintings, I was always drawing cartoons on the side to somehow add to the narrative, or I don't know, maybe I just had funny ideas all the time and I have to write them down.
Very nice. It's very intimate. Your cartoons are very intimate, very accessible. I really, really enjoyed reading them, looking at them. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
There is a question from Jackie, and she asks, how do you approach this text? What inspires you? How to depict each character? Do you just take the description of personal features from the text, or do you do extra research?
Oh, yes. Okay, that's a whole pile of questions right there. I think that reading the Homeric hymns, and I drew them. First I drew Demeter, and then I drew Aphrodite, and then I drew Dionysus. But I think that reading them always evokes it evokes a picture in my mind about what's happening, and I think that is the inspiration for what I just want to see the story on paper. I want to see it how I see it in my head, and so it's a way of engaging with the poems, if that's what they're called. And I let's see. What's the next part of that? How to depict each character. I think that in the Demeter, I thought of it as me. I mean, I had a little daughter at the time, and I think of Demeter and Persephone. Persephone's definitely a teenager, and my daughter was 3 or something. So it wasn't. It was. It's somewhere between how can I be in this story and make it sort of idealized. And the idealization also to me comes from Greek art. I mean, the way characters in vase painting all really look the same. I mean, they have distinguishing attributes, but they're almost interchangeable, a lot of them. So that doesn't necessarily make for dynamic characteristic in comics. So and I guess I can play with that with expressions and composition and things like that. And for the character of Aphrodite in the Homeric hymn to Aphrodite, I wanted her to have, well, I took attributes from Cypriot archaic statues of Aphrodite, where they often have 3 or more necklaces, and they have big earrings, and they're very dressed up. But I sort of made her a less formal version of that type of statue. Let's see,
Glynnis, can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking about the way that for you it was an opportunity to sort of enter the story yourself?
Yes, yes.
And at the same time, you're drawing on all this knowledge, all your archaeological knowledge, right? Because you are also an archaeological illustrator, so you're just talking about the way these statues really are. I'm wondering, does that make it harder, like the fact that you actually know what people wore, and you have some really that deep knowledge in these comics? I mean, you're very careful about the way that you work, right? I'm wondering, does that make it harder or easier for you to enter the story, or?
Let's see. Harder or easier? Well, it's easy to. I think it's very easy to just do everything straight out of your head, and I'm often very guilty of that. But I really appreciate it in other people's work when they do research and draw costumes in the style of so I feel like I would like to make sure that their clothes are right. Although I don't think I'm not as a perfectionist about it as I could be.
Well, you're not bound by it, right? You have other goals as well.
Yeah, that's hopefully. Yeah. Like I think of in the Eric Schanhauer series, The Age of Bronze, he is very accurate about clothes, and I mean it's also a fantasy of the ancient world, so you really can do anything wild. But I want to be very unlike the movie Troy, where they were throwing all kinds of stuff together that didn't belong. So those are maybe the extremes.
That's purposeful.
Yeah.
Sarah's question, do you start at the beginning, or do you have a particular scene in mind to start with? I guess in any of the comics.
I guess that's a good question too. I definitely start at the beginning, but I read it many times before embarking, and then sometimes I have to read it again. And then sometimes, like in the Dionysus one, I worked with a different translation and then switched over to Greg's translation, and there was something very different. I thought the wine was inside the ship, and Greg thought it was outside of the ship, so I had to change the scene and redraw it, which was really great. And it's the biggest treat to work with Greg for that. For his translation, his interpretation. So I think certain scenes definitely are more vivid than others, and that's one of that is very vivid. But I guess also in that question is kind of the overarching what the look of the comic should be like, and it definitely comes from certain scenes. And I suppose in the Dionysus, that's why I wanted to do it in blue and red, because of the image of the twining vine, which would be red grapes, and the wine dark sea with the red, dark red, blue. So.
Sorry.
Yes. Go ahead.
When you're reading the text, are you visualizing in comics? So, in front of you, because when I read a book, I visualize, a character and real people. But when you're visualizing, do you see cartoons?
What? You mean these aren't real that I'm drawing? I guess that I'm somewhere between that, because I guess that I know. It would be like saying to a Greek vase painter, are you drawing vase painting, or are you drawing this real? I guess I'm doing it as really as I can in my stylized kind of way. I mean, I think I don't want it to look absolutely real. I want there to be some kind of remove from reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe I think that I visualize these things in scenes, and then once it comes to putting it on paper, it breaks down into more of a comics format. So I could also draw, a single image on a piece of on paper, and another single image in another, and instead of putting several images on the same page. It's just a matter of form. Yeah.
That's a really interesting question, because one of the things that we talk about in the Heroes X project is the way that verbal art
Yes.
within ancient Greek society, that kind of idea between artificial and real, the artificial could be just as quote-unquote real.
Yes. Yes.
So in a sense, that's something that's really important for us to think about, the differences and the similarities.
Yes. And I've also played with making things very much more realistic when I'm doing paintings, especially from photographs, where they look photographic.
Right.
Paintings I've done, they really don't when you see them in real life, or you look close up. They don't at all. But yeah, I like the idea of different levels of realism or naturalism, and the scale of real to comic. And there's one theory that's Scott McCloud, who's famous for writing a book called Understanding Comics. His theory is that the less realistic something is, and he reduces it down to a smiley face, the more that you can relate to the character. And I don't know if this is true, but this, for me, say like Charlie Brown is very relatable, and maybe Prince Valiant is not so much so, because he's much more realistic. So, I don't know, just a theory.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question is from Myramidon. He's asking, would it be fair to say that your work refrains from showing the more disturbing side of these gods and their behaviors?
Yes, I like this question, because I feel like I do leave out the most disturbing, and I just answered that, and I was thinking, who does highlight the disturbing aspects? And this isn't this, and I gave him the example of Frank Miller's 300, but that doesn't have to do with the gods. I mean, it's just pure battle, pretty much. But I am quite interested in disturbing aspects of the gods' behavior, and I think that I hope it's okay for me to paraphrase the answer that I already wrote on the website, but again, I have to refer to the vase painting, where I think of how stylized the figures are, and I think of especially one vase by the Brygos painter. I think of the Sack of Troy, where I think they're throwing the baby Stynax, if that's how you say it, over the walls of Troy, which is horrifying. But it's done in this beautifully drawn kind of these nice little figures on a vase, where you wouldn't necessarily recognize the horrors that are going on, or tell the difference between a party scene if you didn't know this mythology. And there's something about that that I appreciate, that that I want to maybe bring out the horrors by through the humor, if that doesn't sound like a contradiction. And I think that I'd like to get closer to it the more I work. I mean, right now I'm working, I got into the medieval period somehow. I'm working on a Boccaccio story that is also set in the Mediterranean, and it involves a lot of rape and murder, so it's quite awful. But it's somehow also joyously written. It's somehow hard to separate those. I think the violence and the joy of them are mixed up for me. And maybe I just am focused on the humor because that's where I see my way in.
Mm-hmm. I just
If that makes any sense at all.
Yes.
It does. Greg's compensation, when Professor Nash talks about compensation in ritual, and these horrible things are happening, but in ritual they are compensated and they are beautiful, and
yes,
that brings the joy into picture.
And I suppose the drawing is my way of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just drawing. There's a small daily ritual that compensates for the horrors of the world.
Glynnis, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, I can't thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. We're so excited to see your future work. And,
oh yeah, me too.
And one thing I would like to mention right now is that I know that you did some filming recently with Professor Nash and with Professor Milner, really focused on your work on the Homeric hymns and on Sappho. So I know that we're going to be able to share some more of that with our community in the coming months.
Thank you.
I hope you'll come back in touch with them.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I hope to see you on hour 25.
Yes, please come back.
Yeah.